In praise my soul to hear the song of praise before and sing below. And though it takes the parting of the ways, yet I must onward go. I hope to hear throughout unnumbered days the song earth cannot know. They sing and I'll hear song. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms. Lean Jesus, safe and secure from all harms. Lean my stubborn will at last hath yielded. I would be thine and thine alone. And this a prayer my lips are bringing, for within me thy will be done. Sweet will. Jesus gave
Okay, I guess we'll get started. So we're in Daniel chapter 7. Last week we started this chapter and we were introduced to multiple characters, so I'll just kind of briefly go back and touch on the different characters we've seen so far. So far we've seen four beasts, Daniel first, and then four beasts. So Daniel's having a vision that God is allowing him to see. In the vision, starts off with four beasts. The four beasts are basically the same as the statue that you saw back in chapter 2, I think. And so we won't go through all four of them again. But there are four of them, but really for the purposes of what you're going to see the rest of the chapter, really only the last beast is really all that relevant. So you can kind of forget about the first three and focus on the fourth one. Within the fourth beast, it had 10 horns, and then another horn kind of sprung up out of that and kind of took away 3 of the horns, and that one is referred to as the little horn. So that is going to be something else that we'll get to over time. So you have the fourth beast, you have the little horn, which is a part of the fourth beast. Then you have the Ancient of Days. And then we got into the next character right at the end of class, and we didn't really get very far into it. So with that in mind, we'll kind of pick back up at verse 13, which is where we started talking about the next character. So we'll just read that again. So Daniel is speaking. Now, remember, all this is happening in the vision, so none of this is literal in the sense that it's happening outside of the vision. So verse 13, it says, I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man. So there's a couple key things here. Notice it says that it's like the Son of Man. So they're just like the beasts have things that resemble animals. The son of this individual is going to have a resemblance to a human. Okay, so but he or the individual is going to represent more than a human. So just like the beast look like an animal, it represents more than an animal. And the Son of Man looks human and is human, but represents more than just being a human. Okay. But the word there for man is one of the words that you can use for humans. It's actually it's the Aramaic version. So the Hebrew version of the word is Adam. The Aramaic is different, but they're the same word. And if you recognize Adam, it is the word in English that we call Adam. Okay, so Adam's name in the Old Testament means humankind, basically. So it's both a proper name as well as a noun, okay? And when you read in the Genesis account of creation, it talks about man being made from the dust of the ground. The word for man is Adam, okay? So Adam is both a description for humankind as well as his actual name. And that is the word that's used here. So the individual here is called a Son of Man, meaning he is human, but he is like a human in that there is more to him than just being a human, okay? All right, so it says he's coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. So this individual is able to actually approach the Ancient of Days. Now, the Ancient of Days is the one we saw a little earlier in the chapter, and we realize that that is God the Father. So this individual that we're calling the Son of Man is an individual that can directly approach the Father within the royal court or the divine court that we saw earlier in the chapter. Okay. Verse 14, it says, Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom. Now one of the beasts earlier was given dominion for a brief period of time, but now this individual is going to be given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. And so when it's talking about serving him, that means that he can receive worship from mankind. Okay, so he is man, but he's more than man, and in that regard, he can receive worship, okay? So it says his dominion is an everlasting dominion. So the beasts all had their own kingdom, but their kingdoms are temporary. They're going to come and then they're going to pass. But this individual is going to have a kingdom that lasts forever. So his dominion is going to be markedly different than that of the beasts before him. It says, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. So as we look at all these descriptors of the Son of Man, obviously he is human, but there's more to him than that. He's going to have a kingdom and dominion, but unlike the kingdoms of the world that were previously described, his kingdom will last forever and it will not pass away. Now, it becomes fairly easy to figure out who we're talking about here, right? Okay, this doesn't take a lot of rocket science. And Jesus uses this passage from Daniel 7, 13 and 14, and he combines it with Psalm 2 and Psalm 110, and he quotes from those three passages collectively numerous times that you can read in Matthew. And he applies them to himself and says that these verses were talking about me. Okay, and so I'll just give you a few examples. If you look at like Matthew 22, 42 through 44, he refers to Psalm 110 and says that's about him. In Matthew 25, 31, he talks about sitting on his glorious throne. He tells the high priest the same in Matthew 26, 64. And also in 24:30, he combines Psalm 110 with Daniel 7:13. And then in Matthew 25:31, he says he's going to sit on his throne in judgment. So there's numerous places kind of in a 5-chapter span there in Matthew where he's going to reference Psalm 2, Psalm 110, and Daniel 7, 13 and 14 numerous times and kind of blend those passages together and say that these passages all referred to me, okay? But there's a little bit more that you can take from this. So we saw earlier in the chapter that Daniel was seeing the unveiling of something you call the divine court. And I don't want to get too deep into the divine court and what that is. But we noticed in, let me see what verse that was. Verse 9, it mentions thrones, plural. In verse 9, it says, I watched till thrones were put in place. So Daniel saw at least 2 thrones being put in place. So the divine court has at least 2 members, one of which we know is the Ancient of Days, which is God the Father that talks about there. But when you look at the Matthew account, where Matthew is recording Jesus speaking and Jesus is referring back to these passages, Jesus repeatedly says that he's going to sit on his throne as well. And so you know now that there are at least 2 members of the divine council. There's the Father and then there's the Son, okay? Now, and when you look in Revelation, Revelation mentions 24 additional thrones, 12 for the 12 tribes of Israel and 12 for the apostles. So if you take all that together and take it literal, then there would be the divine council would include God the Father, God the Son, the apostles, and some representation of the 12 tribes. So if that's the case, then there would be at least 26 thrones sitting in this divine council. So what does the divine council do? Well, they meet and they can issue judgments. And the judgments that they're going to be making, at least for the purposes of this chapter, is what are we going to do with these 4 beasts? Specifically, what are we going to do with the 4th beast? Because like I mentioned earlier, the 4th beast is really the only one that really comes into play for the remainder of the chapter. So there's the question of what's going to happen to the 4th beast, and then more specifically, what's going to happen with the little horn that kind of comes out of the 4th beast. So we'll kind of keep that in mind as we kind of move forward here. Now, if you're slightly confused at this point, don't feel bad. Daniel is too. Okay, so if you look in verse 15, it says, I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. So one thing to kind of take away from this, and he's going to reiterate it with the very last verse of the chapter, is when a human is revealed a vision from God, it is both physically and mentally and emotionally taxing. And it's very draining and very difficult on them. And so he's very troubled by what he's seeing. Now, he's saying this within the vision, so he has not stepped out of the vision yet. He's still in the vision as he's saying these things. And he says in verse 16, I came near to one of those who stood by. So who is he talking about? We saw earlier that there are, let me see the exact wording. It's in verse 10. 1,000 thousands ministered to him, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. So he's going to end up talking to one of these individuals, which would make most sense that they are angels, okay? And so he's going to go talk to one of them and basically ask what's going on, okay? So he says in verse 16, I came near to one of those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this, so he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. So who is he talking to? It doesn't name the individual here, but when you flip over to chapter 9, verse 21, the angel Gabriel is mentioned by name, and perhaps he's talking to Gabriel here. Not really sure. It may be the same. He may be speaking to Gabriel both here and later on as well, but it doesn't specifically say that. Okay, so now this individual is going to start explaining to Daniel what is happening and what is going on. I meant to do this. Let me back up real brief. So it seems pretty obvious to us that verses 13 and 14 are talking about Jesus, and that is the traditional view. I will just mention two other interpretations, just very brief, that some people have, and they tend to have them for various reasons, some of which are not. Maybe I shouldn't say that. They have them for their own reasons, I'll just say. So one is that the individual in 13 and 14, which we would assume is Jesus, is a collective individual representing the saints as a whole. And the reason they say that is it talks about the individual getting the kingdom of God. But as you move further into the chapter, it's going to say the saints get the kingdom of God. And they can't work out, well, if this is Jesus, how does Jesus get the kingdom and then the saints get the kingdom? Shouldn't it be one and the same individual or group of people? And there's an explanation for that. Basically, the explanation is Jesus gets the kingdom first, and then he gives it to his saints. And that's what Daniel's really looking at. The other theory is that this is some kind of angel that they're talking about. Neither one of those really make much sense, but if you read in some commentaries, you might come across something like that. So that's why I just want to mention that briefly. Okay, let me get back to verse 17, where this person or individual starts to explain to Daniel what is he seeing in this vision. All right, so verse 17, those great beasts which are four kings, which arise out of the earth. So last week when I was telling you that it talks about the four beasts coming up out of the great sea, that it doesn't literally mean the Mediterranean Sea, because it's going to turn around right here and say they come up out of the earth, okay? And so what it's really talking about is the great sea earlier in the chapter means the sea of humanity, and the beast earlier is made to look like they're kingdoms, which they are, but they also are the kings that represent the kingdoms, okay? So it's both the king and the kingdom that the beast represents. And so when you think about the beast coming up out of the great sea, what it's talking about is an individual, a human, is going to come up out of the chaos of humanity to lead a kingdom forward. Just like Nabopolassar came up and brought the Babylonian Empire to greatness, followed by his son Nebuchadnezzar. The same is going to happen with the Medes and the Persians, with Darius rising up to make them into a great empire, and then Alexander the Great is going to rise up to make the Greeks a great empire, and so forth. So it's talking about an individual king that's going to rise out of the people to make that group of people into a great nation for a period of time. And so that's what presumably the angel here is talking about. So here he says they're going to rise up out of the earth. It's the same concept though. Verse 18, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom. So see, that's where it says, okay, in 13 and 14 it says the Son of Man is going to receive the kingdom. This is the first time now where it says the saints are going to receive the kingdom. Some people see a discrepancy there. There really isn't one, but some people think there is. Okay. So it says, the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Okay, so there's a couple things going on here. I'll hold that for a little bit later. So the words for saints, what it really means are the holy ones. That's what the Hebrew word actually means. It comes from the Hebrew word kadosh, which means holy. And so these are the followers of God that it's referring to. So it uses the word saints in our English translation, and that's a fine word. But just bear in mind that word, what that literally means are the holy individuals, okay? So if you want to be a saint, you have to be holy before God. And what does holy mean? It means you act and behave in a manner like God wants you to act and behave. And so these are the ones that will receive or inherit the kingdom. Okay, so presumably the angel at this point has only explained to Daniel that these four beasts represent four kings and their collective kingdoms, and that the saints are going to end up receiving a kingdom that lasts forever. That's the gist of what he said so far. Okay, verse 19. Daniel's kind of like, okay, that's good, but I've got a lot more questions. So let's get into the more confusing part of all this. It says, then I wish to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, which is why I said you don't really need to know about the three beasts now. It's really about the fourth beast that we're talking about. Now he's just going to go through a description of the fourth beast. He is going to list 2 additional new details here, but a lot of this is stuff that's already been said. So he says, the fourth beast is exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze. The nails of bronze is a new detail, just makes it sound more ferocious, which devoured, broke in pieces, trampled the residue with its feet. So in other words, the fourth beast is very, very powerful. It's also very, very destructive in its behavior. All right, so verse 20, and the 10 horns that were on its head. So again, the 10 that we talked about last week. Some people remember that the fourth beast is the Roman Empire, but some people then try to figure out, okay, what are the 10 horns? And they start trying to make it into 10 Caesars, successive Caesars, or 10 smaller fragmented countries that arose out of the Roman Empire after it fell apart, or whatever the case. And that just all gets very confusing, 1, and 2, you can't find 2 people that agree on who all the 10 people are. So it just becomes a mess, and it doesn't really even refer to that anyway. 10 just means a whole bunch of something. In other words, he's very, very powerful. The fourth beast is powerful, and that's really all. The picture that the vision is trying to present is just one of power. Okay, I lost my place, 1 second. Okay, verse 20, and the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than its fellows. Okay, so Again, it's the rehash from last week. So you have these 10 horns, but then there's this 11th horn, if you want to call it that, a little horn that's going to pop up and basically take power away from 3 of those 10 horns, and it's going to then behave like a human. And how does it do that? It's got eyes, so that in other words it can see, but it issues a lot of pompous words, depending on your translation. Other translations say great things or mighty things or something to that effect. The New King James goes with pompous words. So it speaks a lot of things that it shouldn't say. Basically, it boasts a lot, or it says things it shouldn't. At this point, I'll just stop real quick and just kind of tell you another interpretation of this. I don't want to spend long with it, but if you know premillennial people that believe in premillennialism, what they'll try to say, the gist of it is, Jesus will come back, he'll reign on the earth for 1,000 years. The saints that have died will be raised, they'll live with him for 1,000 years on the earth. And they try to talk about signs that are going to come that might reflect all this. And the reason I mention all this is they make something out of these 10 horns. And people are doing this today. They try to figure out what 10 countries in the former Roman Empire that are currently in Europe might band together for a single economic cause or something to that effect that would point to this being the case. And then out of that pops an 11th thing that kind of gains control of some of it. And just like the people who argue these are 10 Caesars or whatever, and nobody can agree on the 10, nobody can agree on the 10 countries either in modern day times that this might represent. But if you know premillennial people and they get excited about this kind of stuff, this is the kind of thing they will talk about, and they'll go here and try to, point to stuff with all this and try to make it make sense in that way, which is very difficult to do, but anyway, that's what they'll try to do. So back to reality for now instead of that. So the angel Daniel is reiterating what he has seen, and he's basically asking, I want more clarification on this because this part really didn't make any sense. All right, so verse 21, he continues on. He says, I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against them. All right, so now we're getting a little more detail about this little horn. So the little horn takes some power from from 3 of those 10. And what is its purpose? What is it going to do with that power? Well, it's going to issue a lot of, New King James Version, pompous words, but it's also going to wage war against the saints, okay? And it's going to prevail against the saints for a period of time. All right, and so that's another one of the things it's going to do. All right, verse 22, how long is it going to do that? Verse 22, until the Ancient of Days came and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. So in other words, this fourth beast and its power, some of its power will go to this little horn, and the little horn will wage war against the saints for a period of time until God, the Father, or the council as a whole will make a judgment and say enough is enough, basically, okay? So when will that actually happen? Well, if you look in Revelation, that will keep going until, if I can read my notes, until Jesus comes back, and then God will issue the final judgment. I'm sorry, I can't find in my notes at the second where I wrote the actual verses down. Oh, here we go. So, All right, let me just go a little bit further in here, and then I'll get back to my notes. So the little horn is going to wage war against the saints until the divine council says, okay, we're going to stop this, put an end to it. But that won't happen until Jesus returns, okay? So this is going to persist basically until God or Christ comes back. All right, so verse 23, so now the angel is now going to kind of answer Daniel's questions for him. All right, so he's going to talk about what is the fourth beast, what is the little horn. Verse 23, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, and we've determined it's the Roman Empire. And it says, which shall be different from all the other kingdoms, which we know the Roman Empire was different. It was much larger. It also lasted for a much longer period of time. And it shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. So the Roman Empire did take up the known world at the time. Okay, verse 24, the 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom. And this is where people start trying to make, 10 Caesars out of it, 10, little kingdoms that sprang up out of the Roman Empire, etc. And that usually falls flat when you try to do that. Another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones and shall subdue 3 kings. So this is talking about the little horn. So the little horn will come after the Roman Empire, take power from 3 of the other horns or kings or whatever you want to call it. And so it will gain some power. Verse 25, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and laws. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. All right, so now he finally tells you what the purpose of the little horn is, what it's going to do. The little horn, again, it says it's going to speak pompous words. In other words, it's going to, say a lot of arrogant things, make a lot of great boasts and claims about what it does. But notice who the words are really directed at. They're directed at God the Father. Okay? So the pompous words are against the Most High. And it says, he shall persecute the saints of the Most High. So he's going to persecute the holy ones. He shall intend to change times and laws. So what that may be referring to, and remember this is Daniel seeing this, so this is during an Old Testament time frame. And so some people think that when he says that he may change times and laws, is that he may try to change the Old Testament law and the festival times when they would have worshiped particular festivals and so forth. That might be what it's referring to. But really the gist of all this is, what is the little horn going to do? Does the little horn wage war in terms of physical violence, or is its power in its false words? Its power is in its false words, okay? So what is the little horn actually going to do? It's going to try to take the gospel and twist it and make it sound good, but it will be false, okay? So you can think about things that we're seeing today and how people use words and twist them to make things sound good. There aren't 2 genders. Okay. We don't have that issue with animals, but somehow with humans we do. Nor did we have that issue for all of humanity until 10 years ago. But people twist words and try to make it into things, and maybe it sounds good on the surface, but it isn't truth. And you can think about a lot of other things in current times where people take words and they twist them, and it sounds good, but it's not true. But, to people who aren't paying close attention or aren't really thinking much about it, who are not grounded in actual truth, they will accept it and build their whole world theology off of it. But is that even what it's really talking about here? I mean, that is one aspect where people can take truth and twist it. But what he's really referring more directly to here is taking God's truth and God's message for salvation and twisting it into something that sounds good, but it'll actually take you away from the true gospel message. And so, like, what are some ways people do that today? Well, it's really easy to preach a gospel of works instead of faith. And if you do that, then you have gone away from the truth and you've led yourself into believing that you can save yourself by your works. And that is false. You can preach the prosperity gospel, which is false. You can preach all kinds of variants of what sounds like truth, but they're not really truth. And that will take you away from God. So it's not that the little horn here has to preach something radically off from the Bible. It can preach a lot of the Bible with slight twists to it. And you can lead somebody completely astray just with a small variation. And so the real way in which the little horn is going to wage war is not with physical violence and oppression and killing people and all that sort of thing. What he's really doing is leading people away from God and deceiving them with words that sound good, but they're not really true, okay? So I almost kind of hate to say this, but I will allude to you who this might be based on what some people think, and I'll let you surmise for yourself if this is true. What religious body arose up out of the Roman Empire and preached the Bible with a twist, and it sounds good, but it isn't really the gospel message, but millions of people still follow it today? I'm not going to answer the question, but anyway, you can answer for yourself. Is that who this is referring to? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I will tell you who the individual is. The individual is the Antichrist, okay? So in Revelation, John refers to this individual as the Antichrist. In Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, he calls it the man of perdition. It's all the same person. Now, is this a single individual, a group of individuals, any individual that chooses to fall into this category? It's probably not a single individual. It's anybody who chooses to operate in this style where they deceive people and lead them away from God. So it's not likely a single individual, but anybody can fall into the category of an antichrist if they behave in this manner. And so this is who the little horn is. Okay, the little horn is the Antichrist that you see in the New Testament, in the Revelation, as the term Antichrist, or in Paul's letter as the son of, or the one of perdition. Okay. All right, so with that in mind, we'll kind of keep going. So if you look at the last line of verse 25, how long is the Antichrist going to keep deceiving people? It says for a time and times and half a time. And this is where you have to know some numerology symbolism. So how much is 1 plus 2 plus 0.5? 3.5. 3.5 is half of what? 7. What does the number 7 represent? I'm sorry, what? Perfection, completeness, yeah. So is this a literal time? No. Is it 3? Some people actually think it means 3.5 years. No, it doesn't. It means something less than the completion of time, okay? If you look at the completion of time as the number 7, the fullness of time, He's just saying that this is going to last for something slightly less than the completion of time. But it's going to last a long time. And really, how long is it going to last? Well, it's going to last right up till Jesus comes back. That's how long it's going to last. The message here is that you're going to always have Antichrist, people behaving in this manner, people who are always going to try to lead God's people away from God, okay? And that's really the gist of what this is talking about. So verse 26, but the court shall be seated. So the divine court's going to now meet, and they're going to make a decision on this Antichrist and what they're going to do about him. It says, they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So what's going to happen is the divine council is going to meet. We already talked about who is in the divine council. It's the Father, the Son. And, if you look at Revelation and you take it literal, then the apostles and some representation of the 12 tribes of Israel. And if there are more people on the divine council than that, then I'm not exactly sure who they are. But at least the Bible references those individuals. Okay, so they're going to meet. They're going to make a decision. What are we going to do about this? And they're going to decide that they are going to take away the power from the little horn, the Antichrist, and destroy him. So this is the same thing that you read about when you get into Revelation, where John is going to expound on this and tell you how this is going to happen. And he talks about throwing the beast into the lake of fire and so forth. So if you want to go read that this week, you'll see a bigger elaboration and explanation of all this, other than beyond what Daniel talks about here. But that's what's going to happen is eventually this power is going to be taken away from the enemies of God. And instead, the power that they had is going to be given to the Son, who will then in turn give the kingdom over to the saints. Okay, and that's what this is talking about. And so then it just goes on and again reiterates the fact that the kingdom of the Son and the kingdom of the saints will be a kingdom that lasts forever, and that all people will serve and worship the Son. Okay, verse 26, this is the end of the account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly troubled me, I would say so, and my countenance changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. So when he first saw the vision, he wrote it down, but he didn't tell anybody about it. So if you go back to the beginning of the chapter, he's going to tell you he saw this vision in the first year of Belshazzar. Belshazzar is the last king of Babylon. So he saw this vision around depending on who you read, 753 or 750-ish BC. And so he didn't, even though he saw it, and Babylon is part of the vision, as well as the Medes and Persians that he will serve later, he didn't tell anybody about what he saw. He just wrote it down, and then eventually, it makes its way into the book. But at the time that he saw it, it was very troubling to him, and he just kept it to himself for that time. I know the chapter is pretty confusing. It's a lot of symbolism, a lot of apocalyptic literature, but anybody have any questions? I know the first bell already rang, but the gist of it is basically what you heard in Revelation. This is the Cliff Notes version of Revelation, basically, which is there's going to be an Antichrist on the earth in some form or fashion. He's going to try to lead people away from God. God will eventually put an end to that, and Jesus will return, take his saints home to heaven with him, and his kingdom will reign forever at that point. But does anybody have any questions or anything about any of this that you want to ask? Okay, if nobody does, what we can do real quick, since we just have a minute or so left, If you want to flip over to 2 Thessalonians real fast. So Paul talks about the same thing. In a short version in chapter 2, starting in verse 5. It says, "Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things, and now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time." So the thing about the Antichrist is he's sort of intentionally mysterious and unrevealed exactly who it is or what it is. It says, "For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work, and he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one," so in the New King James uses the phrase lawless one here. So the fourth beast, or the little horn, in Daniel is the same as the lawless one here, which is the same as the Antichrist in Revelation. All right, so it says, "And the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders." So his great power is in his ability to lie. That's spectacular. What a great characteristic. Wouldn't you like to follow a liar? Verse 10, "And with all unrighteous deception among those who perish because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason God will send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they will not be condemned, that they all may be condemned, who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness." So the people who choose to follow the deception and the lie will ultimately be declared unrighteous and destroyed in the second coming. And so that's what Paul's talking about here. It's the same idea in Daniel, same idea here, same idea in Revelation. I know that was the second bell. Does anybody have any comments or questions? All right. See you guys next week.